Isaiah Simmons has been practicing with the safeties in training camp, and now we hear that he's playing a starbacker role. I think I speak for many Cardinals fans when I say, what the is a starbacker? During a recent press conference, Vance Joseph was asked about the progress made by Isaiah Simmons and the role that he would be playing this year. In response to these questions about Simmons, Vance Joseph said, he's our starbacker, or our safety, whatever you want to call him. A starbacker is a guy that plays linebacker, a little bit of safety, a little bit of dime. He's a star position. And in this scheme, it can be a lot of places. I won't share much more than that. When a reporter further pressed Vance Joseph and asked him where Simmons would be lining up from game to game, Joseph responded, "We'll see. It depends on the game plan. Obviously, he is a linebacker, so we'll see where he's playing." So clearly Vance Joseph plans to play Isaiah Simmons all over the place, which he's kind of already been doing, but we'll get to that in a minute. Let's start by looking at a typical defensive alignment and what Vance Joseph is talking about here. Now, in a typical 3-4 base defense, you would have 3 defensive linemen, a nose tackle, 2 defensive ends, a couple of outside linebackers who are typically pass rushers, but sometimes will drop into coverage. You also have 2 outside cornerbacks, 2 inside linebackers, and then a free safety and a strong safety. In this defensive alignment, Isaiah Simmons typically plays one of these inside linebacker positions, the one that's typically called the weak inside linebacker or the will. Now, in the starbacker role, when in the 3-4 defense, Simmons may very well just stay at that will position, but he's also able to go out and play slot cornerback or fall back as a safety or even line up as an additional edge rusher. But the Cardinals play in the nickel much of the time. And in this alignment, those 2 defensive ends from the 3-4 move in to become defensive tackles. Those outside linebackers become defensive ends and continue to rush the passer. And instead of having a nose tackle, you bring in a slot cornerback to be that 11th defender. Now, in this alignment, again, Simmons could continue to be that inside linebacker on the weak side, but he can also go out and play slot cornerback. He can drop back and be an additional safety, or he can be the slot cornerback that they bring in, allowing the Cardinals to bring in another linebacker, which in this case seems to be Nick Vigil. And yet again, he could also be another edge rusher in this alignment. The main point being that Isaiah Simmons gives the Cardinals a lot of flexibility. They don't have to sub in or out as many players. They can disguise their defense because post-snap, Simmons can fall into any number of positions. And it's Simmons' rare combination of size, athleticism, and football IQ that allows all this to work. Now, if this is all sounding eerily familiar to you as a Cardinals fan, it should. It wasn't terribly long ago that the Arizona Cardinals had another hybrid safety linebacker who they used in a number of different configurations, and that was Deone Bucannon. Cardinals fans may remember that Bucannon, who was drafted as a safety, ended up being moved to inside linebacker. But the defensive staff came up with a new term for his role. They called it the money backer. So this raises the question, is the starbacker just another term for the money backer? Are they just the same thing? Well, the answer is kind of, but not exactly. Before I get into comparing the role of Bucannon and Simmons, please do me a quick favor and click like on this video and subscribe to my channel. If you're an Arizona Cardinals fan, I think you'll enjoy my content. So is Simmons just playing that money backer role that Bucannon played years ago for the Cardinals? In order to answer this question, I decided I would look at the snap alignments for each of these players during their time with Arizona. I looked at their positional alignments as recorded by Pro Football Focus and looked at the percent of snaps they took in different spots. Using this, we'll compare these 2 roles to see how has Simmons' usage compared to that of Deone Bucannon. And that hopefully will give us an insight as to whether the starbacker is really just the money backer. Using PFF's data, I looked at 5 different snap alignments. Lining up in the box, which includes both as an inside linebacker or as a strong safety within a certain depth from the line of scrimmage. Lining up deep as a free safety, lining up as a slot cornerback, or lining up as an outside cornerback. Based on these analyses, I found that Deone Bucannon played far more snaps in the box than Isaiah Simmons has thus far. Bucannon played 85.2% of his snaps as either a box inside linebacker or a strong safety. By comparison, Simmons only played 56.5% of his snaps there. And subsequently, Simmons played more snaps at edge at 23.3%, free safety, though barely, 0.7%, at slot cornerback 16.8%, and at outside cornerback at 2.7% of his snaps. Now, it's also worth noting that based on what we're seeing coming out of training camp, Simmons seems to be trending towards playing more snaps outside of middle linebacker. Now, if a significant percent of those snaps are as a strong safety, we may not see a big difference here, as strong safety snaps are considered in the box in terms of PFF's alignments. Altogether, the data here show us a clear picture. Isaiah Simmons is not just doing the same things that Deone Bucannon did. Yes, they're both versatile players and they are both playing in more than just the linebacker spot, but it seems that they're moving Simmons around a lot more than the Cardinals did with Deone Bucannon. Now, there are some concerns that this might raise for some fans. Some fans might say, you know, that moneybacker thing didn't work so well with Deone Bucannon. He didn't get a second contract with the Cardinals. Since leaving the Cardinals in 2018, he's only played in 14 games and only started one of those games. And despite still being only 29 years old, Bucannon seems like he's on his way out of the league, having spent the last couple years on practice squads. So why should we have hope that this would work with Simmons? Is this sort of hybrid experiment doomed to failure? Not necessarily. There are a couple of important differences between Simmons and Bucannon. It is worth noting that part of Bucannon's issues had to do with an ankle injury that required surgery in 2017. But Simmons is also bigger, faster, and more explosive than Bucannon. When you look at the pre-draft measurables, Isaiah Simmons has some distinct advantages over Deone Bucannon. Isaiah Simmons is 2.5 inches taller, 27 pounds bigger, put up one more rep in the bench press, had a faster 40-yard dash time, and his scores in other pre-draft drills were either comparable or better than that of Deone Bucannon. Altogether, there is reason to be optimistic about Isaiah Simmons' ability to play in this role. He's freakishly athletic, he's very smart, and has shown great maturity and leadership going into his third year. And for me, as a fan, that's a combination I'm willing to bet on. If you want more Cardinals analysis, check out this playlist where I discuss some NFL comps for some of the Arizona Cardinals' top 2022 NFL draft picks. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time on The Cardinal Rule.